the white light experience. It was like meeting what some people call God or consciousness or source or the one. And in that experience, it was like a full body downloaded into my cells experience of the wisdom of this being or energy that is everything. I learned how there's actually just one of us, and that this reality, this 3D dimension, is really just a projection of that one. And it seems separate, but it's actually just energy. And so, in that learning around our inherent oneness, because in that understanding, like, how can I create harm if I know that we're all just one thing? How can I judge anyone else if I know we're just one thing? How could I even judge myself in that state? So there came like a huge understanding around the ultimate meaning of love.
My guest today is Erica Tait, who had a near-death experience as a result of hiking and falling 50 feet. When she had her near-death experience, she had a very unique life review, and she was shown that she was actually causing more harm in her life than good. She also came to understand how karma determines where we go next. We're going really deep in this interview, and I have not even touched on what I think is the most intriguing part of her NDE. So, Erica, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here with you.
You have so many elements that I love of an NDE, but I think one of the things that probably will help a lot of people watching is that when this happened to you, you were still an atheist. So before we get into the NDE, will you just tell me a little bit about that part?
Absolutely. Yeah, so for my NDE, I was an atheist. I had a ton of childhood trauma and I was an active addict. And yeah, there was nothing I believed in further than what my five senses could perceive. Science was God, and there was nothing beyond death. When we die, and there's nothing left. So it was a very materialistic and I guess Western, you could say, mindset, and yeah, no higher power whatsoever.
Wow. So why don't you just share the near-death experience in whatever way you'd like to share it?
Okay. So it was September 2014, so it's about 11 years ago now. And I woke up one morning with this really uncomfortable feeling in my stomach, and I didn't know what intuition was at the time. And now I can see that as an intuition, but I decided to go on a hike by myself, the Palisades Cliffs in New Jersey. There are cliffs that run along the Hudson River that separates New Jersey from New York. And I went on a hike by myself, and at the end of the hike, there's this waterfall, but it was dried up. And I had climbed up the waterfall before and made it up perfectly safely. And I was definitely a daredevil, and at the time, so I decided to climb down the waterfall. And I didn't get down. It was like 1 minute down the cliff, and I got completely stuck and caught. And there was no place for me to place any of my hands or my feet. There was one rock beneath me that had a lot of moss on it, and it looked quite slippery. So I just stayed in that position for, I would say, maybe around 20 minutes, waiting for somebody to come that could help. But on this day, there was no one there. And so after I started to get really weak and my arms were shaking, I decided to take a leap of faith, figuratively and literally, and um, stepped onto that mossy rock. And the last thing I remember about the actual fall was just my foot slipping and my hands letting go. And so I fell 60 feet. I broke my spinal cord, my arms, my pelvis, my ribs. My ribs punctured my lungs, so I was suffocating. And that was ultimately what created the near-death experience, what made me die. And also I was so concussed. I didn't know my name or who I was or where I was, and I somehow was able to reach back and grab my cell phone and dial 911. And I was on the phone. I was like, I don't know who I am, where I am, but I'm dying. Please save me. And then I went unconscious. And they traced the call, but it was the signal was hit like jumping off the cliff or hitting the cliff and reflecting into Yonkers on the opposite side of the river. And so the police search team were looking for me there. And so, but I was at the bottom of the cliff for 7 hours. And within those 7 hours, I had my near-death experience. And so the first thing I remember was separating from the body. Um, Recognizing that, okay, I'm separate from my body. I'm not my body. There's something that actually survives my physical body and my death. And also that is not Erica. Like the part of me that survives death actually isn't my personality or this person. Yeah, this person, this body mind that I call Erica. And that was big for me, of course, as a huge atheist, right? And so, um, then then came the life review, where in a moment, in a flash, I saw my whole life before my eyes in just in a moment, and it was interesting because there was no one judging me except for the most objective version of myself. And yeah, and as I spoke to before, I was living a very unconscious life. Like that saying, hurt people is like very true. And I was very wounded and unconsciously creating suffering all around me. And so in my life review, it was almost like an objective assessment. It wasn't like I was shaming myself or judging myself. It was like an objective assessment that showed quite clearly that I was not living in alignment with my soul's purpose here and with the whole purpose of this earth. And so that was a huge wake-up call for me. And in that also, like I learned a lot about what my purpose here is and saw clearly how actually we all have actually the same purpose, but it just manifests differently through each of our souls and personalities. But it's the same core. And then I had the white light experience that many people speak about, but it was like meeting what some people call God or consciousness or source or the one. And in that experience, it wasn't so much like of a cognitive learning. It wasn't like an intellectual learning. It was like a full body downloaded into my cells experience of the wisdom of this being or energy that is everything, including myself, including you, including this computer that I'm speaking to right now. And so I learned how there's actually just one of us, and that this reality, this 3D dimension is really just a projection of that one. And it seems separate, like we seem separate and we seem material and hard, but actually, like it's all that one that's vibrating at different frequencies. And our senses perceive things as material, but it's actually, yeah, just energy. And so in that learning around our inherent oneness, there's actually like there was for me a huge blasting open of my heart, because in that understanding, like how can I be, how can I create harm if I know that we're all just one thing? How can I judge anyone else if I know we're just one thing? How could I even judge myself in that state? So there came like a huge um understanding around like the ultimate meaning of love. Yeah. And I didn't retain all that I learned in that experience. I'm still, even to this day, there's still like unfoldings of the wisdom, that is in my cells, but like my mind itself couldn't retain everything. And I think that's what enlightenment is when you can retain it all, actually, when you're actually walking around with like the full consciousness of the one. But um, I'm not there yet. Hopefully, one of these lifetimes coming up, well, that'll be true for me, but it's not here yet. And yeah, so then it was a joint decision between me and the one that I would be coming back into the body to fulfill my mission in this life. And I had some people speak about having resistance to that, not liking coming back to the body. There was none. It actually felt quite neutral. It wasn't like a excite. I wasn't excited about it, but I also wasn't resistant to it. And a pretty crazy part about the story for me is that a firefighter was off duty but listening in on the phone call, and he had an intuition that he knew where I was, and he did the hike. And in the moment that I decided to come back into my body, I took a deep breath in. I remember taking a breath in and looking up, opening my eyes and looking at the tree above me, and that little firefighter, the exact moment I did that, the little firefighter's head popped over the cliff and he yelled out my name, Erica. And yeah, he saved my life, and he we had army boats come and save me, and got taken to the hospital, where I was in the hospital for a month and inpatient physical rehabilitation for a month, and then bedridden for 6 months and in a wheelchair. And so during that period of almost a year, it was just a total integration of my soul that was purified through this near-death experience, you know, coming back into a highly traumatized and wounded vessel. And so there had to be like a deep healing process and a deep integration process of the two. And yeah, a lot of crazy, like, I just had a lot of cool experiences during that time. I became really sensitive to energy and um a sensitivity to like beings that I could feel in spaces with me, and I became really like electrically charged where I would break a lot of technology just by being on it. I went through a bunch of phones and computers and lights when for a few months after the experience, um and yeah, and I think the most impactful part of that integration process was coming to terms with the fact that Erica is going to die because, my soul now knew, okay, when everything's safe, like we're not gonna, this part of me doesn't die, but when I came back into the body, it's still like, but Erica does, right? Like the body, this personality, this ego that I call as identity, it does. And so that is actually really hard to also come to terms with, you know? So it's like it's to hold the two both. For me, it was like to hold the both that like, yes, this body mind that I call Erica will pass, and that's sad and that's really hard to be with. And there's a part that survives that cannot die. It's just energy that changes. And so, yeah, to really come into um the full acceptance and understanding of that truth has changed my life in many ways.
Wow. Erica, what an amazing experience. I think the first question I want to ask you, I know that you've told this part of the story before, that the night before this hike, you had been at a party. Will you share that real quick? Because I have a question I want to ask related to that.
Absolutely, yeah. So the night before the party, I mean the fall, I was at a party with my sisters, and I got into a fight with my little sister. She was only like 12 at the time, about how there's no such thing as God. And I made her cry. And yeah, I used to get into arguments about that pretty often, but I think this night was a little bit more meaningful, especially because of how young and really devoted she was. And so making her cry, and then the next day I go on this hike and then I realize God. So there's
So what was the first, so you come out of the canyon after you've been rescued. At what point do you realize and remember in the human body of Erica that you've had that experience? Was it immediate or did it come in pieces? How did that happen?
it came in, I would say maybe like a week later because I was so, I mean, for that first week, I was pretty much unconscious for a good few days. I was so heavily uh medicated, or just I was in a lot of surgeries and tests, and honestly just like shock, that I think that I was just asleep for many days. But once I woke up, and then all of a sudden I just like I completely felt differently. My senses were different. There was a clarity, there was like knowings and understandings, and then I started to have the memories come back.
So at what point did you reconcile this belief that you had had so strongly into your 20s, and now you've had an experience that supersedes a belief or anything that you've read or anything that you previously thought? How did that happen? How did that work for you?
Yeah. Um, it was more, it was just like a surrender. It was like a damn, I've been wrong for a long time. Like I've been, yeah, there was no debate in my mind like anymore, right? It was just like it was a total acceptance and a surrender, it was a humility that I had, that like, wow, yeah, I really was wrong.
Were you able to tell your sister?
Yeah, I was. And we resolved that pretty quickly. She was really happy to hear that it was true.
I can't imagine how many people in your life, because this didn't seem like it was something you just kept hidden and it was your own thought. You were pretty vocal about it. How did other people react to you now having this, or did you keep that under wraps for a little while too?
I kept it under wraps for a while until I actually like understood what just happened. Like I needed to process and I needed to like learn too a little bit more like about the experience and um I would say at, after I healed after my body healed, so it was like after the 6, 7, 8 months, that was when I started to share more, and my family was pretty open-minded to it. Like they were all very open, and so I was really lucky in ways to have that. And friends, I had to change my whole group of friends changed because of who I became. It was very different, you know? So I kind of dropped a lot of my in a very loving way, but I dropped a lot of my old friends.
I would imagine. Oh my goodness. Okay, so the life review part of it, this is always my most favorite part of any NDE. And you had something that I've heard very similarly over and over again, that it's flashed and it was like in a moment because time it doesn't exist on the other side. But as that moment happened, you somehow absorbed that it wasn't just one scene from your life, it was your whole life. Can you describe how you were absorbing this as it was happening?
Yeah, it's really hard to describe. Um, it's like in one moment, all my memories were downloaded like into my consciousness, while at the same time having enough separation from that experience where I could assess it, where I could, uh, yeah, like observe and assess those experiences.
So in the same moment that they're being downloaded, you have already assessed it. Like that's the power of the intelligence without time on the other side, that you are
Yeah.
able to like that, and you've assessed it all, and like almost like a superhuman AI computer.
Yeah, I was gonna say it feels like a computer. It's like boom. Okay, here it is. Yeah.
So you made this assessment, or I think you said, I don't know how you worded it, where you came to understand that you had been causing more harm than good as a result of your objective observation of your life at this point. Can you give us, if you're willing, a couple of examples of scenes that you maybe were not really aware of before the life review, that you went, oh man, like didn't even realize that that happened, or I did that, or that affected anybody?
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah. I would say just being more involved with my own needs and desires than the people around me. Like, for example, um, not being more caring and compassionate with my friends or my boyfriends at the time or my family. You know, I just much more self-focused. And in that, you know, yeah, just not being as loving as I could be.
So I know some people, when they have this life review, they experience things not only from their own perspective, but they often have the vantage point of seeing the perspective of somebody else, whether they lived it again from that aspect or just experienced it. Did you have that in yours as well?
I didn't. it was like I could completely feel the impact on them. Like I could feel all of the impact. I wasn't like seeing completely from their eyes per se, but I was feeling all of the impact of my own behaviors on them.
And what did that feel like when you are analyzing millions of little interactions that you had over a 20+ year lifetime up to that point?
Uh, it's interesting because emotions are different in that plane than they are here. Because if I was here, I would probably feel a insane amount of like shame and guilt and regret and like, and not to say that it was like on the other side, it's like there's a little flavor, there is flavor of regret, but it wasn't, it was more of like a, okay, wow, I did not I did not um I did not live out the mission. Like I did not I missed out on so much ultimately karma that I could have cultivated in this life. And I'm going to then now like pay for it in some way.
Okay, so this is a big thing. So for a long time, I've always thought about karma as being just a cause and an effect.
Hmm.
I think sometimes in the spiritual community, people use karma the way that people in religions use hell. Like karma's a bitch, karma's gonna get you. I think it's cause and effect, but I would love to hear your assessment of it because you have a much different perspective than I have in my assessment.
Yeah. Yeah. Karma, I do believe is cause and effect. And
Okay.
so any thought, action, emotion, behavior, all of them, they have effects, whether it's positive, negative, or neutral. And and so like what I learned about when we die is that there's an accumulation of our karma. And that doesn't mean just bad karma, it also means good karma. The fact that I was born, like that I came back actually and got, it was because of the accumulation of my good karma. Like all
Oh,
of,
wait a minute. What? Okay, you need to expand on this.
sure, sure. Um, Yeah, there was a understanding that because of all of the good I did in my past, it allowed me to then, the fact that I even have like this mission on earth, like the mission to be here, that I'm so strong in my mission, means that I have accumulated a ton of positive karma in my life. So which means I've been seeing quite clearly for lifetimes. And the fact that that I came back was actually also an effect of the good past karma. And like, I feel like this was kind of like this was, I think the near-death experience was almost like a crisis point between all of my like good karma and then, but also like I was also accumulating a lot of bad, and there had to be something, cause and effect created this kind of like explosion.
Okay, now my mind is racing around. I've never heard anybody say anything like this. I love this conversation on a level you will probably not even understand. But the reason I think that this is so important is because over and over and over again in the comments of these NDE videos, and I've done at least 300 interviews of NDEs so far, people say things like, I'm never coming back. I feel like people were forced to come back. This is a prison planet. We're being forced to be here because they see the negative aspects and they feel like they're imprisoned in them. You are a white woman living in the United States, which is a first world country, and you're saying that you've accumulated this karma. And I'm wondering, does that apply to everybody on the planet? Like, is it all And we're going to go super deep because this is going to explode into the oneness part. But is it a good assumption to make that if you are living on this planet right now, you have had a certain balance of more good than bad that allowed you to come here and be here in the first place? Or did that karma determine where in the planet you were experiencing your lifetime from?
I think both. I think that this dimension does have a ton of suffering, but it's better than other dimensions that we could be in. And there are definite and I feel like there are places in this dimension that are more difficult to be in than others. And so I do believe that karma does play a huge part in where we get placed and who we get placed as in this dimension. Um, and I think that there's dimensions that are even where there's even more suffering than here.
So, for people who are not familiar with the concept like dimensions or they don't fully understand it, how would you describe that so that they could understand what you're talking about?
Yeah, I would say that I call this a dimension. Mm, but I would say each like a dimension is how energy, like, ooh, this is very difficult. I've never been asked how to explain this because it's really hard to understand for even myself, but um, everything is energy. Everything, yeah, everything is energy, and different dimensions vibrate at different frequencies. And this one is vibrating really slowly. The vi energy is really slowly, and that's why everything is like feels and looks like matter. Because matter is energy that's vibrating at a very slow frequency. And different dimensions have different frequencies. Um, and yeah, they're like kind of layers of reality. And yeah,
I
the
love,
best
I
I could do.
love, love how you describe that. Okay, I took you on a tangent. I'm bringing you back. You said the karma that you saw in the life review that you accumulated, you feel like you missed the opportunity as you were going through it prior to the life review on things that you could have resolved. And now you made a comment and said you're going to have to, I think you used the word relive it again, or experience it again, or you're going to have to do something with it at some time in the, and I'm going to use with air quotes future because we're talking about things that are really happening all at the same time. But since we're in the earth constraint, it has to be linear. So will you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, yeah. What I've learned is that karma needs to be lived through to the very end. And when we don't, anything that's unresolved will continue to come up in through different mirrors. So any action that I haven't resolved, and what really karma being resolved means is that there's like loving presence. Like there's just like I am acting or responding to anything with just presence and love and compassion, you know? And as much as I can do that, I resolve karma. And yeah, and anything that I don't respond to, anything that I react to, and maybe even create more harm in will cause an effect. It will come back it could come back in a completely different, it might not look anything like what it does in this moment, but it will. And yeah, lifetimes will continue to move through those cycles.
I saw a show this week that I've been watching on Netflix. It's called The Sign. It's actually a show that's about Göbekli Tepe. It's an ancient ruin site, but in it, they have a period where you're in one dimension and then somebody comes back to a different dimension. And in the first dimension, this person was like super powerful and used his free will and suffocated another person. And then the next dimension, he's using an oxygen machine. He constantly chokes. He can't breathe. And the woman who's transitioned between these dimensions says to him, this experience of you not being able to breathe is the karma that you're paying back for suffocating this person in this other dimension. Is that a good representation, an example of what you're talking about how things could come back in a different way?
I think so. That feels true.
That is such a fascinating thought, because I think that it's not even just the actions that we have with others, but I'd love if you would elaborate what you've come to understand about how our thoughts are a part of this karmic wielding tool I'll use that
Yeah,
we have.
yeah. Well, ener if we look at this planet as like an as everything is energy, right? Actions are energy and they have a lot of force, but thoughts too are energy. And so the intention behind thoughts and the intention behind actions are very similar. It's just that actions carry a little bit more weight. So there's a little bit more karmic impact in action, but thoughts are also an action. They're actually also energy. And so they also carry weight, just not as much as physical action. So, um, and then emotion too. Emotion's actually in the middle. It's like where thoughts are a little bit lighter in frequency, emotions are a little bit more dense, and then action is the most dense. And so there's no separation really between any of them. The most important thing is the intention behind it all.
Mhm. Amen. I think intention counts more than anything from what I've been shown on the other side as well. I love this conversation because I think people start to really inwardly reflect how they're reacting to things. And I think when we're having a karma conversation, it always tends to go to more of the negative, but most people are good. And I think most people do more good than they do harm. And so I think people discount the karmic effect of all the good things that they're doing and how much that ripple effect has an amazing impact and also helps them, as you said, that combination of what you had done well and what you had missed accumulated to get you into the place that you are right now, having this experience instead of a different one.
Absolutely. And I and a part of that is also us having compassion towards ourselves. Like that's
Mm.
also part of the karma is like we are so human and humans are literally going to continue to make we're as humans we're going to continue to make mistakes. We are
We're the
literally not
worst.
perfect. Yeah. Like we're in school right now. Like Earth is a school. We are in school. We are learning about these things and we're going to continue to make mistakes and that's okay. Like we want to be as we actually create so much good karma from just being actually compassionate and forgiving and gentle with ourselves because then we can actually also within that relationship we actually much more easily mirror that for others.
And we don't spend more time with anybody but ourselves.
Mhm.
So we actually have probably quite a lot of ability to influence our karma based on how we're treating ourselves.
Yeah.
I love that because a lot of times people come on the show and they talk about self-love. And I think there are a lot of people who don't really know how to do that for themselves. And maybe it just starts with speaking more kindly to yourself, too, when you're by yourself in your mind.
100%.
So let's go to the part of the life review that I think has so much confusion on this planet. And this planet's all about this show is really about helping to wake up the collective to understand the power of who they are. One of the things I see a lot in the comments is judgment, a lot of judgment. We're thinking that we are being judged by God, another entity, anything. And there's a ton of talk in the comments about people going to hell and all of these other aspects that don't align with what I've experienced on the other side and what most of my guests have talked about. So you said that you had an objective version, the most objective version of yourself, judging yourself. Will you expand in this in a way and maybe tie it into what I've talked about what I'm seeing in the comments so people can understand from your perspective how this really worked?
Yeah. Well, the most objective version of me and us is very similar to that white light that people call God. And, you know, if we recognize that we're all just that one thing, and that one thing is extremely loving and extremely aware, you know, it's ultimately so forgiving and compassionate and totally recognizes our humanity because it is a part of our humanity is that energy, is God. So what I'd say is that again, on the other side, there was no shaming. There was almost it was just like, hey, you're in school and you did the best you could. Here's here's how you did and okay, you're gonna keep learning, you know? And I was really and again, I was an addict. Like I was I had I had I was really on an extreme end of creating harm, you know? And even in that, I was so forgiven and I was so loved in the the clear seeing that I wasn't living in alignment.
Beautiful. Do you think, from your perspective, that a hell exists?
Not in the same way that many people perceive hell. I believe that hell is almost like a state of mind or a state of consciousness, and um, we can really create almost our own hell. Um, and it's a way of thinking and being.
I agree. All right, you talked about an alignment with soul's purpose. And you said that every soul had a purpose, but it manifested differently based on whatever their experience was. And there's also a purpose for the earth. So will you share what you understand about those two things?
Yeah, well, one, this our souls. I've learned that our souls are actually, you know, part of the soul of Earth. Like we actually are a part of the Earth, and we are the soul of the Earth. We're a part of the soul of the Earth. And so, actually, the whole planet and us, our souls, like they have the same goal, which is to remember and awaken to its ultimate and true nature, which is that white light consciousness. So ultimately that's where we're all going. And that's really, yeah, that's what this is the whole thing is about, is to get there. And we're at different levels of remembering that. All of us here, we're at different levels of remembering that. But ultimately that's the same purpose. And we all come in with different gifts and tendencies and karmas and past lives. And so we're all going to be moving that purpose through us in different ways, depending on who we are as people.
So that was the purpose of the soul. So the purpose of the earth then is to what happens like when we get to the point where enough of us have woken up that it's like that tipping point? What do you think happens?
I mean, I'm not fully enlightened yet, so I wouldn't know exactly, but what feels true is first there's gonna be the more people awaken, like mass awakening, like say we get more people than not to be awakened, it's gonna feel like heaven on earth. Like we're going to be creating like levels of freedom and liberation and love on the planet that we've always desired. And then the more and more, I think eventually when everyone wakes up and is enlightened, then it's just going to explode into the sun.
I kind of agree with you with that because I've had experiences when I've been on the other side where I have been that source, that light energy, like what you were talking about. And this earth experience seemed like just a simple thing that we do. Doesn't feel simple while we're here, but from the aspect of that higher place, this felt like it was just a simple, like almost a game that we set up for ourselves to see what we could do.
I love that. Yeah, totally.
And I wonder how close we are to getting people to wake up. I see more and more channels like this opening up. I hear of more and more people having near-death experiences, and you've had almost 11 years to integrate this. Do you think that a near-death experience was something that your soul planned to have, especially since nobody came by to help you on a hike that is normally crowded where people are constantly coming by? There was not a soul around.
Yeah, I'm still in a place with like around how much is cause and effect versus how much is actually planned. Those two things they're almost opposing, but
Mm,
right? Like how much of
yeah.
this is just like all planned versus everything's cause and effect. So I both feel true somehow.
They probably
And maybe
are.
they probably are true in some way because it's all one thing, and so they both feel true, and I just don't fully understand.
I say the same thing. The more I experience this stuff and the more that I'm shown, the less I understand. And the integrating is definitely the hardest part. So you said that was wisdom that went all the way into the cells. So will you explain what you think we are as souls having this experience here on the earth plane?
We're we're consciousness that is being projected by the one God, by the one true light, the twin consciousness. We are just projections of that, and so we're consciousness that are seemingly separated in order to liberate itself. It's almost like this souls are here to liberate consciousness.
Oh,
And
wow, I love that. I'm writing that one down.
mhm.
Wow. The other part is the joint decision to come back. Again, another thing that I see over and over again in the comments about being forced to come back, being forced to be here. Will you talk a little bit more about why some people get to make the decision you think like you did and others are just told that they have to come back?
Yeah, I wonder the how much of the ones that are like forced to come back that don't want to, how much their personal minds are still intact while they're there. I think while they're on the other side, because I think that's the only thing that creates resistance to what is our minds. Um, we can say the ego or the personality. And so I think that that part of us, yeah, does resist um experience here. And and um for me, there's such a neutrality that I think that I've cultivated over many, many lifetimes of being a deep meditator over many, many lifetimes, that I think that there's a neutrality that I worked quite hard for that actually is like a little bit more accepting, even though it's really hard.
Do you think, or were you shown how many lifetimes you had previous to this one?
I've seen in when I had in deep, deep meditative states, I've had experiences where I've understood where there was like there could be like hundreds of thousands, which like I don't even know how that makes sense, but it was a lot.
Well, it makes sense from the oneness perspective. If we're
Yeah,
all just a fractal of source, then you are me and I am you. And if you got to a different level, and I don't mean a level that's good, better, best, just different, that you could access information that probably pulls in more of the one.
right. Yeah, that's true.
That would make a lot of sense.
That would make a lot of sense.
So the firefighter who rescued you, did you have a conversation with him and tell him what happened to you?
Ugh, this is a part that I feel a little guilty about. You know, after the fall, for like 2 years, anytime I would think about calling him, I would just like start hysterically crying. I could not do it. I was like, I can only make this call once I can actually even like speak without breaking down and crying. And then he passed away
That's
before I
okay.
got
Now he knows everything you were thinking and saying.
in a way, it's like, all right, now I can actually I can still feel connected to him in that way. And but you know, there is a little bit of regret that I hadn't connected with him before.
I think on a soul level, you're okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I would like to talk a little bit more about what's happened with you with your abilities. I think it's so interesting over and over and over again. You NDEers, you affect technology, you blow up computers, you can't wear watches anymore. What do you think changes? Because it wasn't like your body had the near death experience, it was your consciousness that did. Do you think your consciousness just comes back in at a higher vibration and that's what causes this messing with the electronics?
Yes, that's exactly what I think happens. I think that we start to vibrate at a like that consciousness starts to vibrate at such a high frequency that it starts to interfere with everything. And I think that that's how intuitive abilities also come in because I think it's all dependent on frequency. And the higher we're vibrating as beings, like the more sensitive we become. Um, and then these abilities start to come online quite
Did you
naturally. And
did you have to learn to work around that? Can you wear a watch?
no, the electricity thing stopped after um 6 months or so.
Okay. And you also mentioned that you were able to, after this experience, feel other beings in the spaces that you were in. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. Um, that was really intense for me. Um, it was intense, especially when the beings were not as like angelic. Some felt really angelic and some felt actually quite like they were suffering. And so, but when I was in in my healing journey, like when I was bedridden, there was more of the angelic beings that would come into my space and like there was no open windows, no wind, but my fan would start moving and the curtains would start like flying and there's breezes, but they're not coming from anywhere except for like just there's beings there, and I could just feel them, like I was just being like held and um like guided actually. It was really interesting. And then I've also had experiences where there's beings that have, been, I think, suffering and needing attention. And I've just sometimes would get really, I have fear reactions because I just didn't know. I've learned now how to work with these kinds of experiences, but back then I was very like naive and scared.
What did you do to work with them?
Um, now I mean, I had a teacher that taught me these mantras to help liberate suffering souls, and burn some herbs and then just like chant these mantras that would actually really help to help them along their path.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing. Well, and I think that we have free will too, and I don't think that people understand how powerful they are. And I was shown one time when I was on the other side, as I was coming back into my body, I had a thought about controlling free will of something else. And I was immediately communicated that if I did that, it would negate the entire experience. So I don't think that any other entity is allowed to breach your free will if you don't want them to.
Mm, yeah,
Do you
I
agree with
love
that?
that. Yeah, I do. I do. I definitely do.
And I think people just need to embrace the power that they have to understand that they really are in control and they don't have to interact with those things if they don't want to.
Yes.
So, did you have any other abilities that have kind of evolved over time in the last 11 years since you've had this experience?
I would just say like intuition is quite strong, sensitivity to energy is quite strong. Um, I guess you could call it psychic phenomena, comes in at points, and it is getting stronger over the years, and I'm learning how to um cultivate some skills and other ones just kind of leaving alone and letting them die off maybe.
Do you wanna give an example of one that you've had, like an experience that you've had?
Um, I think like good ones.
Sure.
Yeah, I work with people all the time, and so just my ability to know what is happening or going to happen, or you know, what they need or something like that, or specific words that come in, or different, just yeah, it'll just be intuitive, like a channel that is just here to serve the people that I work with. And so it comes in all sorts of different visions or dreams or words, energies.
Well, you use a word that I think that's a perfect way to end this Q&A, which is service, because you
Mhm.
were shown that that was the main thing that we were supposed to be doing while we're here, and not just like some of us, but I think everybody. So will you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in recognizing our inherent oneness, the innate impulse is to serve, because we recognize that in serving everyone else, we're serving ourselves, and it actually is just like helping all of us to do that. And in doing that, we are actually feeding the energy of the one, which is love and which is consciousness and awareness, and we keep feeding that more and more, and that's what creates awakening. And so, yeah, service is the ultimate way to um to help the process of awakening on the planet.
Beautiful. And I think that it doesn't have to be something big. Even to your point earlier, if somebody could just be in service to being kinder in their thoughts to themselves and to others, it would probably make a difference.
100%. 100%. That's everything. That's it.
I love
It
it.
doesn't have to be like a whole, you don't have to be a healer or do some crazy work with the collective. Like, no, you can literally just in your day-to-day, like say a nice compliment to your friend, or to yourself in the mirror, or do the dishes for your husband, like something like that, and that's enough.
I love that because I think sometimes people think they feel overwhelmed that they can't do something bigger, and it's not about the size of anything because on the other side, the intention is what was judged the most, not the how big or small something was.
1000%.
Well, Erica, I would imagine that there are a lot of people watching who want to connect with you. And I know you do some special things. And if you're willing, do you want to kind of share the transition you're going into?
Sure, yeah. So yeah, I'm a psychotherapist, and I own a practice where we integrate spirituality with more traditional clinical psychotherapy, and we have a practice, and we serve people on the East Coast in New York and Pennsylvania and New Jersey specifically, and now I'm transitioning to live in Maryland, where I'll be based at it's called the International Meditation Center, and it's a Buddhist meditation center where we hold 10-day silent meditation retreats. And yeah, it's really lighting me up to be a part of this work. And um, yeah,
I don't know if I'd make it through the first day, honestly. I don't know. I don't know. That would be a challenge. I'm not good at the silent game.
I get that.
Well, so is there a way that they can get a hold of you then?
Sure. You could find me on Instagram, and my handle is at Erica Tait dot spiritual therapist, or email, which is Erica at quantumpsychotherapygroup.com.
Okay, excellent. I'll put those in the show notes for everybody.
Great.
Erica, this conversation makes me feel so good. I love all of the messages that you shared, the depth of this experience and the wisdom that you pulled in and integrated in the last 11 years is incredible. And I just want to thank you so much for what you are doing personally to help wake up the collective consciousness, because we all know how much it is needed right now.
Mm. Thank you so much. And I see you and the work that you're doing to get all of this out to the collective. It's so important. So thank you.
Thank you. And of course, this is absolutely nothing without each and every one of you who tuned in to watch, to share, to comment, to share your experiences and stories. So I want to thank you so much for watching. Next up, check out this playlist of other NDE interviews. Please like and subscribe. It really helps this channel to grow so I can bring you more content. Thank you for watching. I'm so glad you're here.